Good afternoon, everyone. This is another one of my President's videos, and I'm very excited to have a faculty member with us, Elena Newman. She is a psychology instructor here at the college, and I remember meeting Elena very early on when I started here back in 2014. Elena, thank you for spending a little bit of time with us this afternoon. My understanding is you teach at least 3 different psychology courses for SEC. And I would really like to talk about some of the key concepts that you cover in your interpersonal relations. As you know, I'm really always talking about something called Goal 9. And there's a lot of concepts in Goal 9 I think are kind of similar probably to some of those things, but you can talk about any aspect of that or any other thing you think is so important about what you teach. And I think you just told me right before we started this video that you believe every new college student should have this particular class. So tell us about that and what concepts do you think are most important?
So interpersonal relations is a very, it's a very impactful class. It's filled with a lot of personal reflection activities, at least from the perspective that I teach it. We talk about a lot of about ourselves in the beginning part, and then we talk about communication in the middle, and then relationships at the very end. And so a lot of the students find the course uncomfortable because it kind of pushes them to look into themselves a little more and examine certain things about themselves, about their life, about their relationships, about how they communicate. But it's a very impactful course in that it validates them in certain areas, and then in other areas it forces them to look beyond just themselves to kind of see how they fit into this world or into this puzzle that we call society. And so my biggest push when I teach this class is, being honest, and a lot of the assignments are not graded based on how they answer the questions. It's graded on how much thought and how much analysis they do with the question and how it relates to their life. Some of the topics we talk about are not very comfortable for some students. I do tell all of my students that whatever they say in the online environment is confidential. It's between them and me. And if they feel called to share something, we talk about in the class that everything that is shared in the class is the author's own story, and we are not to be retelling of that story. It's not fair to the author, kind of like a copyright. So it's a very impactful class. I've had students tell me that it was one of the best classes they've taken. I've had some students struggle with it because of how personal it was, but and I took it myself before I taught it. I took the class myself just to see kind of what it was about.
So what about, we live in an environment now with social media and the ability to obtain information so quickly. There is a lot of I would describe as reactionary behavior that we're observing. And one of the things I heard you say earlier is it sounds like in your course you really promote what I would describe as reflective thinking. And that's something we really push in Goal 9. And it's not easy to do because emotions, as you know, can hijack your behavior. And it can be challenging. I would be really curious because we know a little bit with the neuroscience that the structures of the brain that are thought to be associated with self-awareness and in reflective thinking, they're still early in the development among someone that might be taking your class right out of high school. So I can imagine that is a bit of a challenge for those students. And what are your thoughts on that? And how do you get the students to at least start down that path of being reflective rather than just reactionary in their thinking?
Yep. So one of the things we do talk about is kind of the difference between them now and how they were even 1 or 2 years ago. And so most of our students, most of the students that come into my class are adults by the state of Nebraska statute, they are 19 years old, and they are, at that point, even though they aren't fully cognitively developed, they are still in charge of their own actions, emotions, responses. And so one of the things we talk about is, especially as it pertains to emotion, is that every emotion that we have as human beings is important. It is important to experience it. It's important for us to be validated. And part of that validation, part of that process is to be able to express ourselves in a way that allows us to communicate those emotions rather than holding them inside. And a lot of them will think, well, being happy is a good emotion, being angry is a bad emotion. There is really no such thing. Both of those emotions are very healthy and are very important. And emotions have three parts. They have the physical part. So something's happening to your body to kind of alert you that something's off. You also have the cognitive part of an emotion, where the cognition of it, the process, the physical process, allows you or forces you to kind of think to yourself, what am I experiencing? Am I angry? Am I sad? Am I mad? And then there's also the physical part, or the behavioral part of it, and that's where we get into trouble. So anger by itself is not a bad emotion. It's how we react to that emotion, or how we carry out the behavior that's associated with that emotion. That becomes the issue.
So
And
Elena, oh, sorry to interrupt.
that's okay.
Oh, speaking of that, I have regular conversations about, different emotions. And one of the things, working with leaders and trying to empower my other leaders that I work with as a president of a college, in the climate I'm trying to create, this, I really discuss how to handle different emotions. And exactly what you said, I absolutely believe that anger can be a very wonderful, powerful emotion. And one of the reasons I believe that is because I think when anger is also often associated with something that's not just, something's not right, somebody wasn't treated fairly. And then if you let that anger kind of pass through and think about what caused it, it was that lack of fairness, and you work on addressing the lack of fairness, it really empowers you. One of the things we work on a lot is modernizing our facilities, but we're doing that because we believe our students deserve proper, high quality learning spaces. So we're going to work on that and create that equity and fairness that, you want to have open access, but you want to make sure you're having students have opportunities, everyone having an opportunity to higher education. Give me some specific example of what kind of exercise you might do. You said the students become uncomfortable. So maybe this is probably a bad idea, but maybe you can make me uncomfortable and to give everyone a chance. Or is that a bad idea? I mean, some of the things that you would say to the students.
So one of the things in more general, I have them actually write a paper.
Okay.
So one of the things they do is they actually choose a goal that they want to work on, and they create a goal that's measurable and a goal that's specific. And that really gets them upset, because a lot of times I will reject their goals because they're not enough, they don't push them enough. So they say things like, well, I don't want to procrastinate anymore. Okay, what does that mean? Tell me what that means. Well, I don't want to get upset anymore. Okay, well, what does that mean? You need to make it so you can measure it. And so it kind of pushes them to say things like, I don't want to snap at my, brother or sister every time they do something that I don't like, or I don't, it pushes them beyond just the basic goal. And then they actually create, they look through the book and they find 3 techniques that they're going to use from the book. They have to give me 12 different journals on 12 different days about, and each journal has like 4 different parts. They have to observe their behavior for 2 or 3 days, and then they write a paper about, okay, what did they learn? What was good? What was bad? Did they like the process, not like the process? I have them, some of my classes, I have them do things with nutrition. I have them keep a sleep diary to see what their sleep is like. And some of them say, well, I don't need to change anything about my sleep. And I'm like, well, you're going to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning. That's not healthy. Mm-hmm. So, we have conversations about things like that. Eating habits. We talk about physical health in chapter 6. We talk about, we also talk about how physical health impacts your mental health and emotional health. And, if you're eating a Snickers bar, in about half hour, you're going to be in basically carb coma, because the initial sugar is going to wear off, and you're going to be feeling pretty bad. So we talk about, soda and beverages, and we talk about, importance of water and, all that kind of stuff, and alcohol and drugs. And I show them, a picture of a 43-year-old non-alcoholic versus an alcoholic. What happens to your brain? So we talk about a lot of those, and that brings up some issues, specific, either, with them or their family members, or, whatever the case may be. We talk about aggression. We talk about, when is the last time, why do people cheat? We talk about that. In relationship, we talk about love languages. I have them take a 5 love language by Gary Chapman. He created a 5 love languages test. And, I always ask them, I was like, well, how do you think that compares to your boyfriend, spouse, parent? And so we discussed that. And in terms of, I was, I want them to see that a lot of this stuff relates, to how they live their life. And especially with that love languages, they figure out that maybe the reasons they're having problems with people is because they're trying to communicate to them in their own love language instead of the other person's love language. And so we talk a lot about that. And so, one of the things I would say, have you taken a love language test?
Have I taken one?
Have you taken it?
I have. I'm assuming it's the same. I don't know if it's the same test. I remember I was on a trip and I was sitting next to someone, and this was years ago, and they started talking about, they had this book on love language. Mm-hmm. So I ended up reading it, and it was fascinating, very, very interesting. I can't remember exactly what my love language, Elena, was, but
are you uncomfortable yet?
Not yet, but
okay.
But you're getting there. But it sounds very much like this course would be wonderful for self-awareness. So you kind of better understand yourself. And I really appreciate, the coverage of the physical. I'm a runner myself. I've always done it. It's harder to do now because as I'm older and pretty beat up from doing so much running, but it's really important. Even if it's just a little bit each day, I try to do that. The other thing I try to encourage everyone is hobbies. And you may talk about that, but I enjoy woodworking. And over the last year or so, I've gotten into live edge woodworking, and it's really fascinating, and is a nice way, especially when you're going through something like COVID. It's nice on a Saturday to spend a little bit of time trying to get your mind off of some of those stressful things. But I do have a real quick question for you, or example. So if I were in your class and I had to come up with a goal, would it be an appropriate goal for me to say, Elena, what I'd like to do is be able to get a little better at being able to have my assertions challenged as a leader, without being defensive, and really working on that. And I actually think that's something that I have worked on and do well. But would that be an example of something that would be appropriate for someone to work on?
It would be a good start, but you would need to narrow it down and, again, make it more specific. How are you going to measure that?
Okay.
So the biggest thing is, how are you going to measure what your goal is?
Well, couldn't I sort of journal and say, I'm going to journal what I'm thinking when that person challenges? And if I'm thinking, why are they challenging me? Don't they know that I'm correct and they shouldn't be challenging me? Or whatever it is I'm actually thinking. And which might be, I'm kind of frustrated that they're questioning this, and until I can get to a point when I'm able to journal where I say, I'm recognizing that I'm getting frustrated and I'm going to let it pass through me.
So in your case, as it pertains to that goal, because I'm sure that the environments that you're within that which you work, you have to give them an answer. So you have to give some kind of a response.
Oh, I see.
So like in your case, you could journal about it, but then say, I am going to let it sit for 2 days or 1 day before I give them an answer, so that I have a venting period.
So if I were in your class, you would have said, I'm sorry, Dr. Illich, I know you're the president of SEC, but I'm going to have to correct your goal making here. Is that fair? See, right there.
I have to treat my students fairly. It doesn't matter who they are.
Doesn't matter whether they're the president of the college, which is really important to me. I like to be treated just like everybody else. Well, anything else you would like to add? This is, if someone hasn't thought about taking your course and they watch this video, I know it makes me want to take the course. One more thing, before we leave, you are trying to get me to take you teach dance.
Yes, I'm not a dance teacher. I'm a ballroom student, but
Ballroom student. Okay.
I'm a ballroom student, but my goal, especially now, the things that we're going through right now, people just need a way to vent. And so they need to be able to release, from a behavioral standpoint, they need an appropriate way to release stress. Okay. So one of the ways I find that's helpful for me to release stress is through dance. And so I actually started this last semester before we went into full-blown COVID lockdown. But I got to a point where at one time I had, I think, 5 or 6 students or 5 or 6 people who came, and it was super fun. It's very laid back. I just show you a couple of basic steps. We put on music and we dance for like half hour, 45 minutes.
Well, that's wonderful that you're willing to take the time to do that. And it's wonderful to hear that there's some folks out there that are taking advantage of that. So we appreciate everything you do for the college, Elena. And as you know, I'm an experimental psychologist and behavioral neuroscientist by training. And I do remember some of my favorite classes were in those areas that you're describing. And you learn a lot. I remember taking what was it? It was a group therapy class. And the entire class was a group, the entire class. And it made everyone uncomfortable because you had to talk only about the here and now. You couldn't bring in anything else. And I remember it took a lot of people a long time to get comfortable. So I think it's great that you're challenging people. And when you're uncomfortable is when you grow personally. And
especially in dance, when you're in partnership dancing, that, I mean, obviously we can't do partnership dancing now, but, when you are in a partnership dance, you are communicating via your body. And so your movements communicate without you even saying a word. And that is actually part of communication. We have nonverbal communication as well. And so communicating respect and boundaries and leadership, or, there's a leader and a follower, and, giving space, taking space, all of that is part of psychology. All of that is part of communication, which kind of adds on to the whole package of psychology, I guess, for me.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for spending a little time with us this afternoon. Yes. This has been wonderful, very informative, and we really appreciate everything you do for the college.
Thank you for inviting me to do this.
Of course. So we'll go ahead and wrap up now, and we'll say bye to everyone and have a great weekend. Take care.
Bye, everyone.